Hey, welcome back. Chapter 10, Ruth. I set my alarm for 5 a.m. since I'm the early bird who is opening Sam's tomorrow. By the time the first customer comes through the door, I'll have 4 pots of coffee brewed, 3 regular and 1 decaf, and settled on the warming burners while the cook fries bacon and preps pancake batter. I'll lose myself in the busyness of the morning. The word reverberate through my mind. I'll lose myself. I push them away and take a long sip from the second bottle of Michelob I've brought with me into my bedroom. I let my guard down for a moment tonight. I slipped. But knowing the name of my high school mascot doesn't mean Catherine will come any closer to my family or old friends or James. I could see it in her eyes the moment she nabbed that flyaway detail and clutched it like a triumphant baseball outfielder. She voraciously, is that a word? Voraciously hungry for more of my story. I'm going to put that word on the screen because I think I'm pronouncing it right. I may have to dole out a few more details, but I need to be more careful than I've ever been before. I really don't want to have to slice another finger to divert her attention again. I reached for the bottle of lotion on my nightstand and rubbed some into my forearm, my fingers lightly brushing over the old, slightly shiny patch of scar tissue between my left wrist and elbow. Just as I start to pull down my covers, there's a knock on my door. For a moment, I considered jumping into bed and pretending to be asleep. But Catherine knows I don't sleep much. It was one of the things I taught myself to do without as a single mom. Catherine knocks again and cracks the door. Mom? Come on in. Didn't you say you were going to do laundry tonight? Oops, I forgot. Those last 2 words hang heavily between us for a moment. I wanted to talk to you about scheduling an MRI and a PET scan. MRIs can rule out things like brain tumors, and PET scans can help diagnose Alzheimer's. Dr. Chen suggested I get both, but I figured Catherine and I were on the same page. We didn't need more tests. I take another sip of beer before I answer. What good would that do? What if it's something else, something that can be cured? I knew these conversations with Catherine would be the hardest thing I've ever done. My blood tests were clean. I had a mammogram 2 months ago and a full checkup 2 weeks ago. Dr. Chen believes it's Alzheimer's. My family history is diagnosis enough. But you know how you can heat water slowly in a pan on the stove? Or how there's an instant hot tap in some fancy kitchens? My temper is of the instant hot variety. Don't push me, Catherine Sterling. Those scans will cost us thousands of dollars, money we don't have. You think I want to battle our insurance company like I did when you were hospitalized with mono, then have to work double shift for months to pay the bill off? You think I want more doctors picking at me and telling me there's nothing they can do? She retreated back and towards the door. Sometimes anger has its uses. The thing is, I'm not really angry at Catherine right now. I'm filled with rage at myself. Rotten genes are programming me. I inherited them from my mother and she from hers. Fury seems to be the legacy passed down to the women in our family. I'm sorry, I exhale long and slow. It's been a day. She nods. Understatement. Let's give this a little time before we make any decisions, okay? Catherine hesitated, then nods again. Good night, Mama. She hasn't called me that in years. I'm glad she closes the door quickly because I can't hold back my tears any longer. Beer alone isn't going to do it for me tonight. I put down my bottle and walk over to my dresser and pull out the top drawer. The bottle of Xanax with its bitter white pill is lodged in the back. I swallow one, grimacing at the aftertaste. It will take a little while for the Xanax to relax my muscle enough for sleep to be a possibility. I return to bed and pull out a green notebook I tucked in my big shoulder bag when I left Sam's. I awaken my muscle memory by performing my old palms routine. And now my mind is whirling with images from the long ago time, too. I'm gripped by the need to continue writing my story for Catherine. Someday, it could save her life. That night at Pizza Pizzaio, James seemed to figure out what was going on with Brittany before I even sat down. Outsiders are like that. We size up situations quickly because we need to gauge if and when people might turn against us. And we can't always recognize each other as allies. A lot of the guys at my school had this bravado that seemed fake. They roughhoused and called each other slurs I won't repeat here and swaggered down the hallway while everyone else skidded out of their way. The athletes were the worst, probably because they were treated like gods. They got their lockers decorated by underclassmen before every game, and the theme song from Rocky blasted over the school loudspeaker when they ran onto the field. James wasn't like any of them. He wasn't like any guy of my generation I'd ever met. It's hard to pinpoint exactly how he was different, but the closest I came is to say he wasn't a boy or even a guy. He was a man. The first thing I ever said to him was that I would kill for a glass of water. He laughed and brought me one so quickly that I was still standing behind the chair Brittany had piled her things atop, trying to get her to acknowledge me. James handed me the water, our fingers just missed touching as I took it, but it was a close enough call that I felt a delicious swoop low in my belly. He put a thin, round slice of lemon in it and just enough ice to make it cold, but not so much that there wasn't enough room for a good serving of water. I watched him over the top of the glass while I drained it. He looked at the chair, then at me, then at Brittany, who was in the middle of a dramatic reenactment of a curling iron mishap. James tapped her shoulder. She lifted her index finger without glancing at him and continued talking. James didn't miss a beat. He told her he was just going to move her things. Then he scooped up her purse and backpack and put them on the chair at the neighboring table. That got Brittany's attention. She asked in a loud, huffy voice if he could stop touching her stuff. James acted like he didn't hear her, which was pretty funny considering that's exactly what Brittany was doing to me. He pulled the chair closer to her, the bottom of his legs making a grating sound against the floor, and told her she could keep an eye on her things, and now there was room for everyone in our group to sit down. Mrs. Davis must have been watching it all because she stood up at the head of the table, her eyes blazing. She snapped at James saying she wanted to speak to the manager. I finished my water and slid into the now empty chair, wishing James hadn't tried to help me. He walked around to stand face to face with Miss Davis. He wasn't that much taller than she is in her 3-inch heels. He flashed a sweet smile, one I would grow to love. She didn't scare him one little bit, I realized. I almost lifted my arms and cheered when James told her that he was filling in for the manager and he'd be happy to hear her complaint. It took James only a couple of minutes to calm Miss Davis down. The free glass of Chardonnay he delivered helped. The restaurant must have been short-staffed because James was constantly in and out of the dining room, delivering checks and bringing extra napkins when a kid knocked over his soda and refilled water glasses. He topped mine off twice without my asking. Our food arrived right after I did. The restaurant served lasagna, pizza, which is how I got the idea to make it for you. I pretended to invent it for reasons you'll understand soon. I kept my head down and ate while I counted my blessings. I'd made it onto the squad. My dad was home and he would protect Timmy for the rest of the night. One of the girls who came up from JV, Rosie, the one with glasses who pointed out Coach had only called 11 names, might become a friend, or at least someone to talk to during practice. The only thing I knew about Rosie was that her father had died of a heart attack when she was young, and her older sister had dropped out of school last year and almost overdosed. Her home life couldn't be easy either. I couldn't tune out the barbs Brittany threw my way, but I didn't give her the satisfaction of a reaction. I was pretty sure even James, who was clearing off a table nearby, heard her cackle that she didn't need a second piece because she wasn't a piggy, just as I reached for a third one. James didn't react either, not in the moment anyway. Coach Franklin stood up, crumpled his greasy orange-stained napkin, tossing it onto his plate. He had broad shoulders and shaggy brown hair, and some girls thought he was cute, but I felt like he tried too hard to be hip with his faded Bruce Springsteen t-shirt and the Eric Clapton autographed guitar he kept in a glass case on his office wall. Coach told us it was time to elect a captain, and Mrs. Davis walked around the table, distributing little pads of papers and pens. The pads all had the logo Davis and Libertelli at the top. Brittany's father was the founder partner of the law firm that was our biggest sponsor. Subtly wasn't a strength for for the Davis women. Coach told us to write down the name of the girl we believed deserved to represent us as captain this year, then fold up our papers and pass them down to him. In the ensuing silence, everyone could hear Brittany's stage whisper to the girl next to her, asking if something smelled kind of rank, while she glanced meaningfully at me. They both laughed in that way only mean girls can. It's an art, really. It combines superiority and malice with a dash of exclusivity. Strange to think that just a few years ago we were learning how to French braid each other's hair and taking our first ever sip of vodka from a little airline-sized bottle I'd stolen from my mother's stash. The kind she tucked in her purse when she went out to run errands. Coach Franklin started piling up the votes in front of him while I looked down at my blank paper. I'm not sure what prompted me to do it. Maybe it was Brittany cupping her hand over her face and making snorting noises. I was well aware I put on 10 pounds over the summer, and she was making damn sure everyone else was aware of it too. Or maybe it's because I looked up, saw James' eyes on me, and drew courage from his steady gaze. I decided to stop trying to be invisible. I wrote down my own name. I didn't even disguise my handwriting. I ripped the sheet from my pad and crumpled it up and threw it down the table, then took another sip of cold, delicious water, finishing my third glass. When all the papers were in the little pile in front of Coach, he shuffled them around. Miss Davis sat with her pen poised over her pad, ready to tally the results. Coach reached for the first paper and unfolded it. He called out Brittany's name. There were a few excited squeals. Brittany flicked her hair and smiled. The second vote was for Brittany, of course, and the third, but the next two were for me. I almost dropped my fork. One vote I knew was coming, but someone else had written down my name. I looked around the table. Brittany and her cronies appeared as shocked as I was. Coach reached for another slip of paper. He called out a vote for Brittany, her fourth. Then there was another for me, and another. With 2/3 of the vote counted, we were dead even at 4 votes each. I sensed tension rising around our table like smoke. All the side conversations ceased. Everyone watched Coach intently as he unwrapped the 9th vote. I held my breath. He called out my name. Someone gasped. It might even have been me. Out of 12 votes, I've gotten 5 so far, and Brittany had 4. Was I being set up? If this was another planned humiliation, Brittany was a few steps ahead of me. I had no idea what she could gain from this. She desperately wanted to be captain. The captain got to lead us on and off the field for the halftime show and stood in front of the squad during certain routines. She would never have willingly given up that spotlight. There was only one other possibility I could think of. Some of the girls were rebelling against Brittany. They were rising up and trying to unseat the queen. Maybe she cut them one too many times with her barbs, or maybe they had gotten sick of her rules. Coach unwrapped the next slip of paper. He stopped smiling. The 10th vote went to me. One more and I would be captain. Miss Davis leaped to her feet and started to say something, then cut herself off. I glanced around the table and caught a flicker of a smile across Rosie's face. It looked genuine. If every JV girl voted for me and just one of the varsity girls did, even with all the water I chugged, my mouth went dry. Was it actually possible I could be elected captain? I will work so hard to deserve it. I'd create new routines, the best ones our squad, no, any high school squad had ever performed. I'd offer one-on-one help on the weekends to any teammate who had trouble learning them. Coach Franklin was frowning. Miss Davis sat back down and tapped her pen against her pad. Her face was a thundercloud. Coach reached for the next slip of paper, and I can hear the relief pour into his voice as he called Brittany's name. There was one slip of paper left on the table. Coach reached for it. I wasn't sure which I wanted more, for me to win or for Brittany to lose. The grin that spread across Coach's face told me the vote went to Brittany before he read her name. But Mrs. Davis still looked furious. It was a tie, 6-6. I saw Coach lean closer to her and whisper. James approached them at the head of the table. I heard him offer Mrs. Davis another Chardonnay on the house. She simpered that she really shouldn't because she was driving. James promised to make it a small one, and she fluttered her eyelashes and told him he twisted her arm. Then she asked for an iced tea with extra lemon and 2 packets of Sweet and Low on the side. Even before our town had a Starbucks, Mrs. Davis had perfected the art of high-maintenance beverage ordering. All around me, girls were murmuring. There had never been a tie for a captain before, at least not during the years I've been on the team. Coach's booming voice caused everyone to fall silent. He said that in case of a tie, the coach cast the deciding vote. My heart plummeted. Of course it had to end this way. Whatever made me believe I'd have a chance. Then he announced it was pretty clear Brittany Davis was the kind of girl we all wanted to represent us. Miss Davis beamed and steepled her manicure fingertips together as she stared up at the coach. I didn't look Brittany's way. I couldn't bear to see her smug expression. Coach kept talking, saying our team needed someone who would be comfortable carrying the name Panthers in front of the public. Going to nationals would be an expensive trip, he said, and though we had a good sponsor, some of the girls wouldn't be able to afford hotel rooms, like me. Miss Davis beamed at Coach as he wrapped up by saying that our captain needed to speak the same language as the business people we have to ask for support. Every word was a spike in my heart. He couldn't just say Brittany's won. Coach had to spell out why I could never be captain. My mother was a drunk and my father was a handyman, so I was trash. Rosie looked down and I thought I saw her blushing. She was embarrassed to witness my humiliation. I wanted to bolt. No, what I really wanted to do was hurl a heavy piece of pan on our table at Coach's head, then grab Brittany by her Barbie hair and smash her face into the table. Rage burned within me. A buzzing sound filled my head. They'd gone too far this time. All 3 of them had. My fists clenched as my breath came faster. Then something made me look up. I saw James carrying a tray with Mrs. Davis wine and iced tea and a beer for Coach into the room. James' eyes were fixed on me. I didn't know how much he heard of Coach's little speech, but he must have gleaned something. Because as James held my gaze, he leaned over and spit into Coach's drink. Then he did the same to Mrs. Davis. By the time he delivered the beverage to the table, placing them in front of my adult tormentors with a flourish, the hot tears of rage in my eyes were gone. It wasn't like everything was better, but I regained control. Dinner broke up a few minutes later after Coach and Mrs. Davis had drained their glasses. James was nowhere to be found when I left, even though I looked behind me a few times on my way out the door. But the next afternoon, I found a note tucked into the slats of my school locker. It wasn't signed, but it didn't need to be. I knew who wrote the note. Blocky letters. I watched you today. You should be captain. And that's the end of chapter 10. Okay, so what was this chapter about? It gave some details of her past. Okay, let me think. Anything else? It showed some of her rage. Okay, so that's not really much I have to say about this chapter. So we're going to have to wait until the next chapter. Okay, so I know the words that I was saying, but I still stumbled over them. So I'm still going to put them on the screen so you can see what they are. And I'm sure you probably know how to pronounce them. So I'm not going to have a pronunciation video, but I will have the words on the screen, like I said. So I shall see you in chapter 11. Bye.